everyone. I'm Neena Gopal. Welcome to Global Express. This is where we dissect developments that have a direct impact on India. Today, we're looking at Donald Trump's stunning, dramatic, improbable comeback as the 47th President of the United States after 4 years out of office, which many say is going to bring in an era of upheaval at home and that it will test defense and economic ties with US's closest allies in Europe, the Middle East, Asia, redraw battle lines with Russia, Iran, and China, North Korea, and India. The most remarkable aspect of Trump's second coming is that this is an election victory that every political pollster got wrong. It wasn't a dead heat, it wasn't even close. Donald Trump, as well, no, sorry. Donald Trump, as we all know, won 292 college votes. Kamala Harris won barely 224. Donald Trump won the popular vote, the first Republican to win the popular vote in 20 years. And as exit poll shows, he has the support of Latinos, Blacks, white Americans, and the working class. With control over the Senate, the House of Representatives, and the Supreme Court, he will have control over the executive and the judiciary. How did the Democrats get it so wrong? Was it overconfidence? Were they unable to read the writing on the wall? Is there going to be any soul searching on where the party bigwigs actually went wrong? First, in keeping an aging Biden on for so long as a presidential contender, and then overnight pulling the plug and bringing in an untested Kamala Harris just barely a few months before polls. She was easy pickings. Trump laid all the blame for all the ills plaguing America at her door: illegal immigration, runaway inflation, the cost of living, foreign wars. How did Donald Trump, vilified as a convicted felon and now immune to any prosecution after his election, get it so right? This was Trump unvarnished, staying true to who he really was. Why America turned red in such a decisive fashion, bringing down the blue wall, must be addressed. But first, let's take a good hard look at what Trump 2.0 would be like to deal with, not just at home, but abroad. Let me welcome our guest. Avinash Mohanane is a senior former intelligence officer with the Intelligence Bureau who served in Pakistan and Jammu and Kashmir and brings a unique perspective on what goes on behind closed doors at the highest and lowest echelons of power across our borders. Welcome, Mr. Mohanane. Also on the show is Salil Tripathi, an award-winning journalist of long standing, based in New York. He was foreign correspondent in South Asia, author of 3 books, and there's one more coming, I believe, The Gujaratis, Portrait of a Community. Welcome to the show, Mr. Tripathi. And last but not least, Milan Vaishnav, Senior Fellow and Director of the South Asia Program and the Grand Tamasha podcast at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He's the author of several books with research focused on, among other things, electoral behavior. Welcome, Mr. Milan Vaishnav. Before we break down the reasons behind why America has given Donald Trump a second chance, let's look at the Modi-Trump relationship as compared to the Biden-Harris-Modi dynamic. Let me begin with you, Mr. Mohanane. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was one of the first leaders to congratulate Donald Trump, whom he calls my friend, sentiments that are reciprocated by Trump. What can you tell us about how that will pan out? Because Modi and Biden made a huge effort to befriend each other, took defense and strategic ties forward. I mean, Quad is an example. The ICT is through. A free trade agreement is on the table. There are multiple joint defense production projects and joint exercises. And India has tread carefully. It hasn't gone public with US meddling in Bangladesh. I mean, Hasina, the former prime minister who's taken refuge in India, even congratulated Trump. In fact, the move to bring India into the US strategic calculus predates Biden. It goes back to Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama. In fact, it was Trump who may have overstepped by offering to mediate on Kashmir, which was quickly squashed by Delhi, of course. Do you see Trump's team stepping into the India-Pakistan game again, Mr. Mohanane?
Yeah, good morning, good evening, everyone. Let us see what is the priority for Trump right now. Right now, the priority for Trump is neither India nor Pakistan, because his priorities are largely domestic and international. International also, it is the Middle East and the Ukraine. So, as long as these issues are remaining, he will have little time for India and Pakistan, except if things go beyond certain limits, or the violence escalates in Jammu and Kashmir, or something where India needs immediate attention of the US. So, because,
That's exactly what I was getting to, because it will not be initiated by Trump for sure, but
yes,
it could be initiated by India. Would India actually step, prod, the new president, into taking another look at how they vacated Afghanistan in such a huge hurry? And as you yourself have said, Mr. Monane, previously, there were moves. I mean, the fact that you actually brought it up in a conversation that we've had before on how it was Trump that actually set this in motion, that whole exit from Afghanistan, which Biden administration had no choice but to put into place. But I mean, Afghanistan is still a powder keg. I mean, you can't ignore it. I mean, you have Pakistan claiming that ISIS Khorasan, as much as the Taliban and the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan are attacking frontier posts, military outposts in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan, and they have access to weapons left behind by the US Army. And you told me that those weapons are what are increasingly being used by terrorists in the now very hot Jammu, area.
yeah, absolutely. If you have seen the visuals of the encounter at Akhnur, you must have seen that Indian Army was using armed personnel carriers to flush out terrorists that had infiltrated very recently. Because army would not like to lose men, and M4 rifles have a capacity to pierce through the armor, normal armor that we use. So they had to use a higher level of protection for flushing out those three terrorists that they eventually killed. So now the issue is that with the violence escalating in Jammu and Kashmir, it is escalating almost every day. You have a recent killing of two village defense committee members in Kishtwar area. Where do we go? Uh, Traditionally, in the last so many years of Kashmir violence, it is the US that we had approached to resolve or to put pressure on Pakistan. US had used various instruments, uh, putting pressure on Musharraf, using FATF against Pakistan, using IMF loan conditions against Pakistan. These are the leverages that, or even the military aid. So these are the leverages that US used to ask Pakistan to fall in line and
They're no
ensure.
longer as interested, as committed to power, steering Pakistan away from terror as they used to be.
Yeah, yeah. So, but at the same time, the question that that remains important is what is happening in Afghanistan. You see, at the same time, when we are talking about terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir, Iran is facing a problem from Jaish al-Adl. Now,
Yes.
Jaish al-Adl, Iran accuses to be based in Pakistan. So now the Jaish al-Adl has to get some military support either from Pakistan side or Afghanistan, or where from else they are getting support. Then we have the issue of TTP targeting Chinese interests in the Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Now, where from TTP is drawing support? It's Chief Noor Wali Masood lives in Afghanistan. And we have also seen that for more than 2 years now, America is not complaining against the Taliban. They are in
That's right.
touch with the Taliban through.
So that brings me back to the question. Welcome, Milan. I'm glad to see you on the show. I just want to get to you, Mr. Tripathi. You know, the past camaraderie between Modi and Trump was quite intense. I mean, they had in September 2019, they had a Howdy Modi event in Houston, where Trump addressed some 50,000 Indian Americans. It was quite a significant move. And then there was the Namaste Trump event in February 2020 in Gujarat, where Trump said he would solidify US-India ties. I mean, the Republican politician even praised Modi during the 2024 election campaign. He called him the nicest human being and a friend. So, do you see this, becoming a bigger issue? I mean, in the sense that, I mean, will this continue? You know, in the second Trump administration.
So I think to start with, it's a bipartisan issue. I mean, if you look at the kind of remarks President Biden and Secretary Blinken have made about Modi, they are also incredibly effusive. I mean, none of them has castigated him. None of them have tried to put him in a box of any kind. He was given resounding welcome, a White House dinner, and it had the who's who of the Indian American community and of the U.S. corporate community. So it's a bipartisan thing. That's first thing we need to note of. And there will be a lot of personal camaraderie. I agree with you that Trump is a very people person type of a politician. He likes to say so and so is a great friend of mine. And Narendra Modi also, like, he's not going to say tomorrow that, oh, Biden is not my friend, Trump is my real friend. He's not going to say that either. So that apart, what I'm concerned about, and it would be nice to know Milan's thoughts on it also, because they have recently come up with a very interesting study about Indian American attitudes, is two things: the dynamic within America, where Democrats continue to get more votes from Indian Americans than Republicans do. It is changing, but it is not as appreciably as it is being made out in certain quarters. More importantly, Indian nationals are today the second or third largest illegal aliens and undocumented aliens in America.
Yes, well, that's
Trump
very
has
interesting.
vowed to, do mass expulsions. Now, if he's going to do that, a lot of Indians will fall under the net. Whether it's practical to do it is a different matter, because I think it's an incredibly difficult task. You can barely do 20,000 in a year. And the total number of illegal population in the US is supposed to be around 2%. So it's a pipe dream. But the fact is that Indians will be targeted. They have been coming in illegally. And the second part is tariffs. I mean, Trump doesn't like Indian tariffs. Trump and American businesses would want a lot of India to be opened up to, particularly the services sector. And India didn't do it for Rishi Sunak, so there's no reason why it would do a favor to Trump on this side. So I think those fundamental issues are going to remain, and they're going to act as a natural barrier for anything else that India might want out of the relationship.
That's very interesting. So, Mr. Milan Vaishnav, I'm very pleased to see that you've done a study on this subject. That's exactly why we were wanted to talk to you. So, what can we expect from the Trump administration, especially on the new challenge now to the U.S.-India ties posed by Canada's, charge of India targeting Khalistani separatists, and the case of a former RANW agent facing charges in the US. I mean, don't you think that apart from illegal Indians, that will also, be an issue? Or will Trump just take a different tack altogether, paper over it, and, say that, because India needs the US and the US needs India?
First of all, it's good to be with you. And I want to agree with what my friend Salil said. I think there is a larger strategic logic at play, and that logic has been in place for quite some time. I mean, this relationship right now goes back 25 years to the George W. Bush administration. And I think the key factor at play for the US and India is China. The US obviously sees China as its foremost geopolitical adversary. Given the recent events that have taken place along the LAC, India shares more and more of that same concern. And so that is the larger framework. And as Salil said, it is completely bipartisan. I mean, it's really interesting if you go back to the first Trump administration, when there was so much disruption, so much vitriol between the political parties. India didn't really feature in any of that, right? I mean, India really sort of dodged a bullet. Now, does that mean it's going to be all smooth sailing in Trump 2.0? Not exactly, because there are two issues in particular, and Cyril mentioned both of them, trade and immigration, which have the potential to be real thorns in their
You're
side.
saying that the tariff issue could derail the other side of the the bonhomie between the two on defense and strategic alignment.
Well, I don't think it's going to totally disrupt what's happening on the strategic side of the house because that's valued as quite important, but it could create a new irritant. What we don't know is what Trump is going to do. He's talked about many different things on the campaign trail. He's talked about just putting tariffs on Chinese imports. He's talked about across the board inputs on manufactured goods. He's talked about carving out special deals for countries that are willing to do business. So, this is a very transactional minded president, right? And
That's
so
right.
even if he comes across with saying flat across the board tariffs, he will be open to the Indians saying, well, what if we trade a little extra market access here or change intellectual property law here? What are we willing to get, right? So I assume that is how they're going to handle it. Immigration is going to be very tricky as well because the group coming in around Trump are hardliners, the
Yeah,
hardest you
this is
can
this is
get
the
on
interesting
immigration.
thing. His men are not the same, cut from the same cloth as the Democrats, who were willing to
Well, I
give
would even
India a
go
very long rope.
even further than that to say the personnel of Trump 2.0 is going to be even more extreme than Trump 1.0. Because remember, the first term, Trump stacked his cabinet with many quote unquote establishment Republicans. These were not Trump people. And what they have spent the past 4 years, doing is populating a database of people who are vetted with one criteria in mind, and that is personal loyalty to
Loyalty
Trump.
to
And
Trump.
you don't have to take my word for it. The campaign chairperson for Trump has said that to the Wall Street Journal this past week, saying, "I'm getting a lot of phone calls. Where were you when the chips were down? I didn't see many of you out there," right? So I think it's going to be a very different look in some sense than the first go around.
If I can just come back to you, Mr. Mohanani, the Indian influence in the Trump administration is apparently, going to be the one of the first, one of the people who's been talked about is this Indian American Kash Patel, who's being touted as Trump's pick to head the CIA. It's being said that even if Patel, who's a hardcore Trump loyalist, fails to get the Senate vote to head the CIA, he could still find a place in the National Security Council. Do you see that as sort of impacting on the way India handles the US? Because the US has actually twisted India's arm subtly, and not very obviously, on Bangladesh, on Sri Lanka, and our immediate region.
Yes, absolutely. But I would say that it doesn't make a difference whether a person of Indian origin becomes a CIA chief or the Secretary of State or whatever position. This term, as my colleagues just said, is going to be a Trump era for 4 years. There will be nobody else in the scene in the sense that the decisions all lie on his table. And it is not just a simple, we can think that the Trump 4 years plus 4 years of remaining out of power, we can plot the same in the further direction, but or extrapolate his views, but this may not be working out that way because Trump is totally has become more vicious in those 4 years of remaining out of power. He has been hounded, he has been harassed, he has cases against him. So,
But none of those will apply, Mr. Mohanani, because as president, he will get a reprieve. I mean, he won't be prosecuted, right?
yes,
I mean, because he holds
absolutely.
office.
These all are going to dissolve or melt away. All the prosecution
That's
cases
right.
against him are going to dissolve or melt away within, I think, few days only, another week or 10 days. There will be no case against Trump now left. But that doesn't mean that won't, those people, that period didn't affect him psychologically. He's rather now depending more on the loyalists, number one. And number two, he wants to cut down the size of deep state that he believes was the responsible for not allowing him to function in the first term and being after him after he left the power. Deep state means is the bureaucracy that is filled by the so-called, this is what he thinks is the Democrat people. So he's going to throw away, bring loyalists in all positions, bring DOJ, Department of Justice under presidency. There are many things that he has in mind. How much he will be able to do and when he will be able to do it, we have to see for that.
That's very interesting. I'll come back to you to expand on that in a bit. Mr. Tripathi, do you want to add to that? Because, the people who are going to call the shots in the Trump administration, I mean, it does excite our attention. I mean, who will be on Trump's team? Who will take care of Israel, Iran? Could we see the return of Mike Pompeo? Are there going to be any other old faces? Because there's talk, all kinds of names are being thrown about, like Jamie Dimon, Scott Bessent, and then of course the most interesting of all, to my mind, is Elon Musk. What is the role of this world's richest billionaire going to be? Does he want an official position? Do people with this, want this unconventional entrepreneur? Because he's actually asking now for. For people, for his employees of SpaceX to be employed by the Defense Department. So he's going to exercise, I think, a lot of influence because Trump has already said that he's my friend, and that he's, they seem to share some kind of not just, I mean, as Milan Vaishnav said, a very transactional relationship.
No, that's true, certainly. And I'm glad you mentioned Elon Musk because that was also on my mind. One of the things is that, the old style Republican Party and old style Democratic Party, they had notions and perceptions of conflicts of interest about keeping certain things out. If somebody were to join the government, they would leave their position, leave their money in a blind trust and investments and so on. Those things are not taken very seriously by politicians in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And when Trump was elected the first time, a very perceptive journalist of Indian origin who knows Southeast Asia very well said that this will be like Philippines, Indonesia type of government, which means surrounded by friends who someone might call crony capitalists or surrounded by family. And that's exactly what we saw. So we'll see a bit of a doubling down of that, exactly the way Milan put it about in the Trump 2.0. So we will have Stephen Miller taking a lot of decisions about immigration. And it's not just Elon Musk, Peter Thiel of Palantir. He's going to be a very important player. We must remember that he has very close links with Vice President-elect Vance. So that's also going to be an important part of it. So all these players, some of whom quite rightly, the old establishment Republican Party, whether it is Senior Bush or Cheney's or Romney, they are history now. They are history now. We'll get a completely different set of faces who will be fiercely and personally loyal to Trump. And it's very hard to tell. And they will be fiercely and personally loyal to Trump. It means they may not be fiercely personally loyal to the idea of the US or the Constitution, and certainly not to extraterritorial loyalties such as India. So even if it's Kash Patel, who becomes the CIA director or plays another important role in the National Security Council, his loyalty will be primarily to the president and not necessarily to any other ideal.
That's very interesting. Milan Vaishnav, would you comment on this, on Elon Musk, for instance? Because, I mean, his connection to China is all pervasive, right? I mean, he's got electrical vehicles, production factories there. And, I mean, even though Xi Jinping's EVs are now cheaper and selling more, he still needs China. And is he going to play a role? Because, I mean, all of this time, Trump has basically trashed China and basically said he'll fix them, and he'll impose these 60% tariffs on Chinese goods that come into America. Do you think that would be a kind of a give and take between Trump and Musk on China, or will Trump sort of keep to his hard line on China?
I mean, it's very hard to know because what we know from this former and soon to be future president is he's also, I mean, he has views, but he's also very influenced by who he's in the room with and who talked to him last. I don't expect Elon Musk is going to take a full-time, position in a cabinet role. Trump has mentioned him as bringing him in to chair a government commission, essentially looking to cost cut, right? To get rid of what we like to call fraud, waste, and abuse, right? Those are the terms that are always used. So he could do that, but without, of course, giving up any of his private sector connections. On China, I think where Elon Musk could be influential is even if Trump takes a hardline stance, because Musk has particular interests, to lean in on Trump to make special concessions or carve outs for the issues and domains and sectors that matter most to him, right? And let's not forget that Elon Musk is also a figure in India now. I mean, there was a story reported from Financial Times saying that despite the combined objections of Sunil Mittal and Mukesh Ambani, Elon Musk was set to get a spectrum allocation from the government. Of course, he had made an initial foray into potentially bringing in electric vehicles. It didn't happen. He went to China instead. But who knows, that could come back, right? So I think India could be a part of this as well when it comes to the Musk
India knows the way to
Trump
Trump's heart.
relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very interesting
Could
about
I just
Elon
make
Musk in India.
one point?
Yeah.
Sorry, just going back very quickly on the previous thing on the cases and what happens to the cases. There are 4 big cases right now proceeding against Trump. We have 2 state cases, and that's important, and 2 federal cases. The 2 federal cases involve the election interference in January 6th. And it's likely that special prosecutor will be fired. That special prosecutor could have the last word by issuing a final report to at least get his side of the story, even though he knows no prosecutions will happen or no cases will be brought forward. The state cases are a bit more complicated because the president doesn't have any jurisdiction over what states decide to do. Now, the New York case, he's been convicted. There'll be a sentencing. I doubt he'll be sentenced to jail time. Even if he were, he's obviously never going to serve it. The remaining case is the Georgia election interference case, which is fraught with its own issues. But just to make the distinction that if cases are brought at the state level, right, there's not much Trump can directly do, even if it would be very hard to prosecute and actually incarcerate a sitting president. I think we all agree that's not likely to happen.
Yeah, on Iran, Mr. Mohanani, you brought up Iran being, where the Jaish-e-Adal is active. But, Trump's son, Trump Jr., and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, played a huge role in the last administration behind making Jerusalem the capital. Basically, it ended Palestinian hopes of keeping East Jerusalem, untouched and for the Palestinian people. And they were also Jared Kushner was the man behind the scenes on the Abraham Accords, that the UAE has signed with Israel, but the Saudis are still sitting on, calling for a 2-state solution after the Hamas attack on the kibbutz in Israel. So is that something that Trump would be open to, you think? I mean, given Prime Minister Netanyahu's determination to box Iran in by destroying all its 3 arms, whether it's Hamas, Lebanese Hezbollah, or the Houthis in Yemen. It was Trump who, if we remember right, who actually threatened, to scrap the nuclear deal, that had been arrived at. And so what can we expect? I mean, will Trump be more accommodating on Israel's plans to decimate Iran's nuclear facilities, or that and the Netanyahu government seems divided on that. I mean, it doesn't seem to be as if they have even an agreement on the ceasefire hostage deal. So is there going to be a Trump sort of quiet backing for whatever Israel wants to do on Iran, or will he follow the Biden line?
I think that Trump will have a clear understanding with Netanyahu to go ahead and finish the things, but do it quickly. Sort out immediately. Don't prolong the crisis. And the second thing is that the most important thing is that if Trump is able to sort out the Ukraine issue in favor of Putin, then obviously the Putin support to Iran weakens. So right now, the axis of
I see.
resistance, which is Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, uh, if that doesn't weaken, the Iran remains a strong party in the conflict in the Middle East. So till you take out the Russia, and Russia can be only taken out if the Putin gets to keep the area in Ukraine that it is right now occupying. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for Trump to continue with allow Netanyahu to continue with the same policy and at the same time control Iran. That
He has said that his main objective, I mean, he's promised everyone that he will end all wars, and that, I mean, the U.S. does have its navy in full scale, operations there, monitoring everything that the Hamas and Houthis are doing. So if I could come to you, Mr. Tripathi, Trump's held forth on this, on to end all wars, and as Mr. Mohanani says, could probably play a role in ending the Russia-Ukraine war, possibly because Trump's advisors have already said that they'd like a truce, a land deal with Russia that allows it to take some of the land it has taken, and for Ukraine, Zelensky and Putin to hold peace talks and to end the conflict, which I don't think is, likely given Zelensky's, sort of talk just straight after, the victory. Do you see anything happening? Because the other aspect also is whether, Mr. Trump is committed to NATO and to Europe as Biden was.
No, it's a very interesting question, and it's an imponderable here. And it depends on the worldview you take, whether you take the worldview that Ukraine is a US puppet or it has its own aspirations of being independent and that it wants to be part of NATO. And it's quite possibly, I mean, I've been to Ukraine, I've been to Lviv, but much, much before the conflict in 2016. So what I say is, of course, very dated, and I've not been since the conflict started, but I've read about it. And one thing it's clear is that there is such a thing as Ukrainian nationalism. There is such a thing as Ukrainian assumption of identity and wanting to carve out its own niche. So simply because Trump says, I'm going to cut off supplies, he's not going to roll over. There's a lot of support for Ukraine in the US itself. And there is a lot of support for Ukraine, particularly in Canada, which is a huge Ukrainian constituency and is an important NATO member, and which is where the NATO part comes in. I think NATO leaders were kind of getting prepared for what's going to happen if there is Trump. And you will see a lot more investment by NATO in defense within NATO itself. So we are going, I mean, all I can say is that we are going to be in a much more uncertain period. And it's not going to be a slam dunk where, Trump tells Zelensky, it's all over now, you better sign a truce. And Zelensky will say, yes, that's fine. And everything is over. That's too much of a fairy tale scenario to me.
That's very interesting. I mean, I honestly feel that on Ukraine, I have a feeling that that Trump will actually go through with what he's promised because he has a relationship with Putin. Don't you think so, Milan? I mean, would you agree? I mean, would Trump actually go through with what he's promised, or do you think he'll hold back? Because the EU guys are extremely nervous about having to handle Russia on their own.
Well, I think they're nervous with good reason. I mean, every indication Trump has given us is that he doesn't necessarily have too much sympathy with the Ukrainian cause. I mean, look at what congressional Republicans have been doing for the last 4 years, right? I mean, many of them, if they had their way, if the Democrats didn't control the Senate, would have jettisoned aid to Ukraine a long time ago, right? So there's going to also be pressure from that flank. We don't have to even get into conspiracy theories about Trump and his connections to Putin, Russia, which of course are there. But just looking at practical politics, I think whether he can make Zelensky stand down, as Salil mentioned, is an unknown. But certainly, I think just the withdrawal of U.S. support will send a very clear sign to the Ukrainians, and I think, frankly, the European Union is bracing for impact because for them, this writing has been on the wall for quite some time.
They're ready and waiting. You're right. You're right. In fact, the meeting
Well, I
yesterday
think
that they had.
they're also very worried about NATO, right? And so you have a divide in Europe with half who says, "Oh my God, the Americans are going to ask us to up our commitments. They're going to leave us in the lurch. They're going to threaten to break up this alliance." And the other half says, "Guys, let's stop counting on America because we can't go through this cycle every 4 years. Like we've got to get our own house in order." And I think, that debate internally within Europe hasn't been resolved.
That's
But I
probably
think
where
they're full.
the French President Emmanuel Macron is coming from as well.
That's absolutely right. And so I think, they're of course trying to, in their early messages and tweets, try to send the right signals to Donald Trump. But I think he will continue to turn the heat on Europe as we saw in the first 4 years.
That's very interesting. As a sidebar to this, Mr. Monane, would Trump have a problem with how close India and Russia are and how they're so invested in each other? Because I mean, there is the other aspect, of course, as you brought in about China, but Russia-India relations have stood the test, and Biden has looked the other way, literally, as India's bought Russian oil and all of that. Would that be a problem with this administration?
It depends on whether the Trump administration continues the same policy as the Biden, because then they will be putting pressure on us to stop buying oil from Russia, because that Russia is able to use that money to fuel its war with the Ukraine. So if we continue to buy oil, refine that oil, export it out, so then the Russia is getting the money it's required for the war. So that way, if the war continues and America is interested that Putin should be isolated in the world, then obviously they would not see this transaction with a favor. It depends on how much we are willing to go to accommodate the American viewpoint or American demand, because we have our own domestic constraints of energy requirements and also the price issues in India. So it's a kind of.
So Trump may really not put up as big a noise as because he also doesn't want Putin to disappear, because he's committed to to a Russia that will not be the enemy that it was.
I was reading somewhere that in the period when he was not in power, Trump had spoken to at least 7 times with Putin. What they discussed, it didn't come out in the open. So what he is talking with the Putin, nobody knows, and what he has in the mind, nobody knows right now. And if he says that I'm going to finish the war, as you rightly said, that this is what he claims. Right now, if he is going to end the war, it will be certainly on the terms of Putin only. It can't, Ukraine can't get that land back. There is
In
no.
fact, Mr. Monane, I believe that Elon Musk is the one who's provided the internet connections through his satellite
Yes,
company
Starlink.
to the Ukrainian army. And
Yes,
if Trump cuts that off, if Trump and Musk decide to cut that off, that will ground the Ukrainians. And
yes.
I mean, in a quite a difficult
Yeah.
terrain. They
Yeah,
will
so,
actually
yeah,
lose
yeah. The
lose control.
communication will be a serious issue if Starlink connection is withdrawn by Musk. So right now, Trump has to set up his priorities where he's going to put China, because the problem is that US requires China and China requires US. Both countries are interdependent on each other. It is not that the US can cut off the relationship with China, because still, if you go to the US stores, they're full of Chinese goods.
That's right.
So
That's right.
the cheap goods are available to the people from
So
China.
that's very interesting about China, because Xi Jinping has reached out to Trump in a very conciliatory manner. He's called for cooperation and not confrontation. So Trump could just review his anti-China tirade. I mean, the main aim of China's move, to prop up Russia and then widen BRICS membership, which is de-dollarization, was topping the agenda just a couple of weeks ago, was basically aimed at reducing US world domination. So, I
Yes.
mean, Quad, no Quad, China has basically got a huge imprint now in the Indo-Pacific. I mean, it's got President Xi Jinping's plan is basically to see to it that it gets Taiwan more than anything else.
True,
So
true. So
would you agree with that, Mr. Salil Tripathi? Because
just
do
one
you
point,
see?
just one point, Nina.
Sorry, yes,
Just one point.
Mohan.
If you recall the last time when Xi Jinping went to the US,
Yes.
the main thing that the Biden administration and Xi Jinping were discussing how to control the AI development, because it can create a war-like situation if AI is not controlled. Thank you. You can continue with the others.
That's very interesting. So Trump's tough line on China, will he be able to go through with this threat to slap 60% tariffs on Chinese goods entering this thing? And it will affect, I mean, there's almost $500 billion of Chinese goods, which come in, as Mr. Mohanlal is saying, filling all the shelves in the supermarkets. So Trump is transactional. But he's also, as you all say, you all agree, unpredictable. But do you think that, being the savvy business mogul that he is, that he would be able to extract concessions from China, or will he just keep to his tough line?
No, he'll keep the tough line, but you must remember that one of the issues that cut across the parties, the voters, was inflation in this election, right? I mean, forget about the cultural wars and abortion and immigration. All those things are, of course, important. I don't want to understate them. And there's no one reason why Trump has won. There are myriad reasons why it has happened. But inflation was a very big one. People were upset that the price of eggs had gone up by X% and so on. And if you impose tough tariffs on China, what happens is that anything you want to buy at Walmart is going to be more expensive. Anything you buy off the Amazon marketplace is going to be more expensive. And it's going to hurt the poor more, because it's they who are able to lead a semi-middle class life because they can afford the goods that they want at a price that is affordable to them. And that will change. So that will have to be a very shrewd calculation on his part. He will talk and then he will probably cut a deal. But this is speculation on my part.
That's very interesting. I mean, both of you live in America. I mean, did nobody even flag inflation and the price rise as one of the
it was
reasons
being
that?
flagged. I mean, the whole climate legislation is called the Inflation Reduction Act, and Kamala Harris talked about price gouging and how to tackle that. Trump kept talking about making sure gig workers have better protections and so on. So I think there's a lot of referencing of inflation, certainly, but it certainly did not dominate the waves, because Trump, there were other things which were adding to a lot of noise, such as the comedian's remarks about Puerto Ricans, which was extremely poor taste, but things such as that tended to affect the discourse a lot more.
So no one saw this coming.
As Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy stupid. And I think we have to examine that a bit more, to what extent economy was the driving force.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
Nina, I don't think it's fair to say that nobody saw this coming, in the sense that, I was just looking at a paper yesterday that some political scientists had put out months ago, which said, just take two variables, which is the incumbent president's approval rating and basically the state of the economy, economic fundamentals, and that would have predicted the current electoral college outcome that we're seeing in this election, right? So this was an uphill battle against that the Kamala Harris had to fight from the beginning. When you have a president whose approval rating is below 40%, when you have inflation that has been as high, now, of course, inflation today is 2%. It's very low in the United States, but the prices are still high. The levels are still high. And so people, when they go out and they fill their gas tanks and they get their groceries and they have to do home repairs and have to pay their electricity bills, they see that. And that makes them very unhappy, right? But if you look across the world, this interaction of an unpopular incumbent and inflation is deadly. And let's not remember that Narendra Modi himself has felt the pinch of this. Yes. He came back. But he came back with 240 seats in a weaker position, right? So this is a global phenomenon. And a lot of this was baked in, right? In fact, I mean, to be a complete contrarian, you can say that 130,000 votes in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan go a different way, and Harris is the president, which is we talk about a sweep, but that's what it turns on, right? 3 states, 130,000 votes.
That's very interesting. If I want to go back to Prime Minister Modi, what does he want from the Trump administration? What would he like? Because, President Biden was very committed to propping up India as this, Asian bulwark against China. He tied India into Quad. I mean, India and the US signed so many defense deals which allowed New Delhi to buy military equipment and new defense technologies worth $20 billion, which is quite a bit. And the reasoning behind Delhi and Washington maintaining close relations, stems from their sort of objective of containing China, and now, and that wasn't just limited to Biden. It goes back, several governments. So this defense and technology partnership, will that, continue? And and the fact is that now that India and China have come to a sort of an arrangement on their border, they've brokered this stalemate on Depsang and Demchok. I mean, China is no longer. I mean, I don't know whether I can say that. I mean, completely, but it's no longer seen by India as the hot border issue. Do you think that will go down well in Trump's calculus? Of China being the bogey, if it's even that, Mr. Monani.
Yeah. Look, if Trump administration is determined to contain China, and for that matter, the Trump would like India to keep pressure on China. If there is a tranquility on the border, then China gets able to move away a lot of troops from the border area. And the second issue is the issue of Taiwan. Earlier, the Americans were interested that the Bangladesh government cooperates with them, Sheikh Hasina government cooperates with them, so that they can have some base closer to the Taiwan, so they can fly their aircraft at a short notice. But now that US is now through Mohammed Yunus, it is present there. So that pressure.
So you're saying that America did meddle in Bangladesh?
There is no doubt about it. Once the agitation was over, then suddenly army saying that, look, we'll not fire on our civilians, and that means the army played their game. It was over for Sheikh Hasina, because then 5 lakh people gathering on the streets of Dhaka, and they have to just scale a wall. And the Prime Minister.
Yeah, but to get back to the point about India, China, how would that have been seen in Washington? Because India's kept this whole track about strategic alignment, and multipolarity. I mean, that worked with Russia. Will it also go down well in Washington, the new Washington, with our border with border deal with China?
Now, how much we are ready to involve ourselves in the Quad now? If
that's the question.
Yeah, this is the issue. How much we are ready to invest ourselves in the Quad, and then how much we are able to continue taking a confrontationist view with the China. Because we have seen that when we talked of getting Aksai Chin back, we saw how the Chinese became aggressive, and we saw the 2020 thing happening with us. So we have to factor in that equation also, because we have an issue with China on the border, and it still continues. That border continues, although there has been some disengagements in various sectors recently. So if the Trump's priority is China right now, then obviously you would like India to get out of that control and go back to the this Quad and cooperate with the US on containing China.
That's very interesting because in India itself is the pullback from a complete, sort of involvement in Quad. Do you agree with me, Mr. Tripathi? Do you think that that China basically is could still be a divisive issue between India and the US, and with the new administration in the US?
Okay, so again, I go back to economics here because India needs China. India needs China as an investor. India needs China as a trade partner, and all those things are ultimately going to be hugely determinant because after the incidents in 2020 and the Doklam and all these things happened, you still had the TikTok ban and so on, but Chinese investment continues. Chinese wanted more visas for Chinese professionals in India, and India agreed. Reliance is getting into a relationship with Shein, one of the largest manufacturers of cheap clothing and cheap products. And all those relations are only going to get intensified further. Indian companies, pharmaceutical companies are manufacturing in China and so on. Disentangling this, and I mean, Indian trade relations with China are not as intertwined as US and China's are because of the volumes involved, but they're extremely intertwined. And disengaging from that is simply not easy. With Pakistan, it's a different issue because there are hardly any trade relationships. So posturing becomes a lot easier. With China, it's a completely different game, and India needs China probably a lot more than China needs India.
I think they need each other equally because China's economy is also shrinking, and it would do well to actually invest to see its.
Yeah, but China has the resources to buy itself out through pump priming, which is what it's doing. It has the reserves to do that, and it is still able to manufacture what it wants and sell to the world at a price that others cannot match.
And it's also been reported that China is using the sort of the unsettled border areas in Pakistan to bring in lithium and other very rare earths and materials like that through these borders, which are completely under their control. And Pakistan's turning a blind eye to it. Afghanistan is allowing it to happen, which is interesting, because. But I just want to come back to you, Milan, and ask you. I mean, this threat to impose tariffs on India, which will affect, the IT and pharmaceutical and textile sectors. I mean, Trump did label, India a tariff king. So and India's largest export market in goods and services is the US. I mean, the annual bilateral trade is $190 billion. So US is India's largest trade partner. Do you think that could be upended by this threat to impose tariffs on Indian imports?
Well, I think there's room for negotiation, but I mean, we shouldn't have two sort of, shouldn't wear kind of rose-tinted glasses. I mean, remember that it was during the Trump administration that the United States suspended the GSP program, which is the Generalized System of Preferences, which are unilateral trade preferences that we offer countries around the world. The U.S. revoked India's status under that legislation, right? There were any number of WTO disputes that were brewing between those two countries. One of the things that, don't forget, in the joint statement issued by Prime Minister Modi and President Biden was an announcement that they would lay down arms at the WTO when it came to those ongoing trade disputes, right? So I think you have to look at the Trump administration on trade in two ways. The one question is, how many new affirmative steps will they take to try and punish or cajole India? And the second are, how many of these things are they just willing to let die, right? And I think the Biden administration actually, on many counts, not just this, but also the Panun assassination and so on and so forth, they have not sought to make these headline issues. Yes, the Department of Justice is doing something, but they have taken a very clear stand that we don't want this to disrupt the strategic partnership between the U.S. and India. And we can debate whether that's smart, not smart, but I think they take a very clear-eyed decision. And my sense is that the Trump administration, when it comes to India, is going to err on the side of deal making as opposed to just kind of a blunt instrument kind of punishment across the board.
That's very interesting. Mr. Monanik, if you can come back to your conspiracy theories. You know, the ones that you said there was this block of a group of businessmen, and you said there were three groups that were actually set against, the previous administration as well. So, what kind of role did who was it that was involved in sort of limiting Biden's victory, or I mean Harris's victory? And do you feel there was a role at all?
Uh, we have
Please
the
break it down to us like you broke it down to me.
if you see the state structure of the US, the state structure is first layer. If you see what you look in the front is a president, then there is a Congress, then there is a Senate, there is a Constitution, there is a Department of Justice, all those organizations. Then the second layer of the US deep state is the CIA, Pentagon, and the ancillary industries associated with Pentagon and CIA. And third layer is of corporates, technological corporates, and the other corporates who have interest in maintaining American domination across the globe, which includes Google, Facebook, and other many such organizations. So the three-layered structure, if we say, this forms the real America. So president is one side of it, but the interest of corporates, where Elon Musk also fits in
So, are
that.
you saying they worked to ensure that Trump came in?
Then yes, Elon Musk, yes, tried for that. He got it. But there are corporates on both sides of the fence. There are corporates favoring Democrats, and there are corporates favoring the Republicans. But my issue is that this is the state structure, and this state structure, CIA, Pentagon, and the Trump feels that there are full of Democrats nominees, and he is going to clean all these structures so that he is able to perform what he's thinking or what he has promised to his capitalist friends or corporate friends, how he's going to move ahead. So he would change he's thinking of removing lot many diplomats, lot many officers from the various government departments, and fill it with the private people loyal to him, so that he
Yeah. In
doesn't
fact,
face this
in
time
fact,
the
this is
blocking by the bureaucracy.
yeah. Correct. You're right, Mr. Mohanani. This is apparently the buzz that is. I'd like both Mr. Salim Tripathi and Milan Vaishnav to talk about this. This Project 2025 that has created such a buzz. I mean, Trump has distanced himself from it, and but it was put together by a conservative think tank and people loyal to Trump. And Trump has talked about, manning the FBI with his own people. He's called the Democrats the enemy within. So do you see that happening? I mean, how much of Trump's rhetoric will come to fruition with this? Will he build a border wall as he promised? Will he have these camps for illegal immigrants? I know. And then what happens? There's also question marks about other issues like the Obamacare and schooling and so on. But basically, I want to hear about from both of you about how he's going to appoint both civil servants and federal agents who are pro him, according to Project 2025.
So I
I
think,
mean,
yeah, go on. Sorry, Milan.
go ahead.
You know more than I do.
No. I mean, we have to separate two different things here, right? Every president who comes into power on January 20th has the power to appoint up to 4,000 political appointees across the executive branch.
Oh,
Biden had the same power, Trump had the same power before him, and Trump will have it again. 4,000. Now, some of those are subject to Senate confirmation. Many of the sub-cabinet jobs, particularly senior advisor jobs, special assistant jobs, and so on, are not. You can just appoint them. What the Trump kind of MAGA ecosystem has been doing over the past 4 years is literally creating an Excel spreadsheets of people who fit their criteria. And again, what I said earlier, the criteria is being loyal to Mr. Trump. So that is work that's being done. We hear a lot about Project 2025, but there are many others. The American First Policy Institute explicitly set up for this purpose, right? There are 3 or 4 critical think tanks. The leaders of those will certainly join the administration, but the databases and the personnel files they've collected are going to be influential. So that's the first. I think we can, without a doubt, that's going to happen. And remember, they will have control of the Senate. So when it comes to confirmed positions, there will be limited amounts the Democrats can do. Yes, there are procedural things they can do to delay, but they can't totally derail. Then you have the civil service issue. And there, the principal issue is a plan, an executive order Trump actually signed when he was previously president. He didn't have enough time to implement it, called Schedule F, which was to create a new category of civil service workers that number up to 50,000 that do not have the civil service protections that most of our American civil servants have. And that is what would allow them to go in the State Department, to go into the Treasury Department, to go in the Defense Department, across the length and the breadth of the federal government, to say, I believe that you are secretly a Obama Biden person and you're out. And they can do that as a matter of executive discretion, right? So this is going to work on 2 levels. And I don't think we should doubt their intention. I mean, they have been talking about this for years and years and years. And, frankly, there's very little that can stop them. Now, yes, the courts still can act as an independent check. And undoubtedly, the Democrats, civil society, others will turn to the courts. But ultimately, the apex court of this country is the Supreme Court, where there is, of course, a conservative majority, and that conservative majority could get even bigger under this next presidency. President.
he's going to get control of the House of Representatives too.
Well, it looks right now that that there's still votes being counted out west in states like Oregon and California and Washington, but it looks like they will get a 2 to 3 seat majority in the House, which is slim. But you just need a bare majority to get your work done. So that would last for 2 years. Of course, we'll have midterm elections in 2026, but they're going to have a lot of running room. But remember that there are certain issues which they have used as kind of to rally the base, getting rid of Obamacare. But they had 4 years to do that. And they didn't, because they know that Obamacare actually delivers things to people that they value, right? Like getting insurance while you have a pre-existing condition, allowing your kids to remain on your insurance until they're 26 years of age, and so on and so forth. Those would be politically very painful, which is part of the reason why, even though they controlled Congress before, they couldn't get anything passed, because they didn't have something better to offer.
That's very interesting, really. So I've got, for concluding remarks, I was actually going to look at how Musk and Trump both have no commitment to green energy at all, but I think we'll leave that for another time. But I'd really like all 3 of you to tell me why America has given Donald Trump such a sweeping electoral victory. I mean, what is it? I mean, all of you track electoral trends, I mean, why did he win? Was it misogyny? Did they not want a woman president? Was it race? Was it, what was it? What was the turning point, you think? Was it gender? Or did they just trust Trump more than they did everything else? Mr. Monane.
Yeah, it's a simple answer. The slogan, Make America Great Again. Have America's domination across the world again make this century also America's century. Because that serves the interests of its corporates, that serves the interest of its economy, that serves the interest of its people. Everybody will be happy if America becomes a powerful country and exploits the entire world to the benefit of its people.
Mr. Tripathi, if you could just tell me, did the Democrats blunder in keeping Biden on for, the 6 months before he stepped down? Why did they keep it such a, don't you think keeping it a secret that he was not really up to speed, was a blunder? Because they gave Kamala Harris barely a few months to catch up and she really did not have the bite that Trump had. Would we be correct to say that it was the Democrats blundered and blundered badly?
It's always tempting. There's this famous saying that success has many fathers and defeat is an orphan. And I think that's what's playing out here, that people want to pin the blame, and it's easier in a way to pin it on Biden because, his political career is effectively over, and it was going to get over in any case. So, and to say that, he should have done this 2 years earlier, but it's not, it's a collective failure on the part of the party for not having been more influential and not reading the mood of the nation more accurately. I think Harris did run a very good campaign. It was full of hope. She's incredibly well qualified in terms of, tick boxes, about, she's been in the legislative, executive, and she's been an attorney and so on. And she clearly didn't have enough time. And what's terrible is that she could not run a primary. Now, would she have won a Democratic primary against Whitmer and Newsom and all of that? I have no idea, because then you're talking about an imponderable there. But she had a bad hand that was given to her, and she tried her best, and she came as close as she did. And as Milan put it out, 130,000 votes here and there, and we would have been talking about the first Indian American president, first black woman president, and so on. That's what we would have been talking about. So it's very hard to pick one reason and say that this is the blunder that led to, but it was obviously a contributing factor.
Yeah, but you know what they say, that, nice guys finish last, and Kamala Harris definitely did. So, but can the Democrats recover, you think, reinvent themselves at this point, Milan? I mean, and please, any remarks? I'd really like to wrap it up with what we expect this irrepressible, unpredictable president to do in the coming months.
I mean, the short answer is, of course they can. Of course they can rejuvenate. I mean, remember this again, despite the vote shifts, look at the aggregate numbers, right? This was basically a 51-49 election, right? So the Democrats aren't going, this is not the Congress party getting 19% of the vote as it got last general elections, right? This is something very different. We have a very different party system, of course. The good news, if you are the Democrats, is that there is no standard bearer for the party, right? Obama has gone into the sunset. Biden is out. Harris has lost. And so Pelosi is, still around, but kind of, has passed the baton. So there is now going to be an internal debate over the future of the party, what the leadership looks like, what the policies are, and how they position themselves vis-a-vis the Trump GOP, right? This is not just the GOP, the Republican Party. It is the Trump GOP. He has remade the party in his image. And, the first test of that is going to be the midterm elections in 2026. But again, I don't think that this is a question of yes, the Democrats are in a bad way. They were beaten. They saw an erosion of core vote support from many groups, including, by the way, as our study shows, Indian Americans. And that is a point of concern. But they do also have a lot of strengths, right? In terms of what we can expect, I mean, at the risk of kind of beating a dead horse, Trump is filled with vengeance. Let's not get carried away by his nice remarks at his acceptance speech that he made in Mar-a-Lago. He wants to exact retribution on the people who have wronged him. And that is Democrats, it's the left, it's the media, it's, various foreign interests. And I think he is going to be very focused on settling accounts, right? So we're in for, I think, what is going to be undoubtedly a tumultuous 4 years. I don't think there's any other way of putting it. And he prizes one thing above all others, which is uncertainty. He believes that keeps people guessing and gives him maximum negotiating leverage. And he and his aides see that as part of his USP.
That's fascinating. So we have to wait for January, and we have to wait to see what happens post the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 47th president. We also have to look at whether he's going to prioritize, keeping boots on the ground vis-a-vis Europe and NATO. So, I mean, he does want investment, and he doesn't want to play global policeman. That's for sure. He wants manufacturing back, in America to provide the jobs that he has promised to the people. So what path he'll take, we'll have to wait and see. And so I just want to thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohanane, for coming on the show. Thank you, Mr. Salil Tripathi.
Thank you.
And thank you, Milan Vaishnav. Please click on the New Indian Express website and the Global Express icon and share.